Hello and welcome to the Culture Cave. We are here to talk about 1899 with a couple of good friends. First of all, Conrad, you all know him.
Hello, I'm here.
He's here. Well done, Conrad. Well done for making it. And we've got a very special guest with us today, Mr. David Lightbringer from the channel Lightbringer, but also the new venture, Moon Media. David, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on. Had a great time having you on the new Moon Media channel. We chopped it up, got like an hour and 20 minutes, ranging all over the deepest, darkest questions of 1899. So definitely go check that out. And thanks for coming on, Anthony.
Yeah, no problem at all. Thank you very much for joining us. And we're here to talk about a few different topics. The first topic we've got is all about the mysteries of 1899. Now, we don't want to dwell on it too much. The show's been cancelled, but we still are interested in what mysteries there were. What are the possible answers? That's basically why I started this channel, is to talk about mysteries in TV shows. So what about we talk about, first of all, right? So there was a question about the Black Pyramid. I think we'll start there. The Black Pyramid and the Black Shards and the matter, I suppose. First of all, David, what do you think it is? Do you have any ideas about that? And where do you think it was leading in the show?
Well, everyone loves a good pyramid. So anytime you use pyramids, it's just like with the Prometheus and Kerberos, Greek mythology references, you have to start by thinking about, well, the pyramids primarily associated with the pharaoh's transcendence to heaven. It's just like mountains and towers and sacred trees. All these objects have the sky-ground connection. That's sort of the visual symbolic depiction. So it's easy to see how the pyramid idea you've mentioned the Philosopher's Stone, the Fire of the Gods, and the Prometheus story. We're all talking about things that allow man to transcend humanity in somehow. And obviously in this sort of technical show that we talked about, that might be going towards joining a sim or computer reality or some next step for human consciousness. So that's the first thing that I think of. But I do think that it's more than that. I think if you're putting pyramids in the show this much, we see them, both the little toy pyramid, that's obviously just a piece of code, but it mimics this giant pyramid, which I have to think is on the planet that we're going to.
Yeah, well, I mean, it would be cool.
So I've speculated. I'm gonna put my cards on the table here. I've speculated that the pyramids, as we all know in real life, were built by aliens, and therefore, does it stand to reason in 1899 that this pyramid is also some relic of alien technology left behind by like a precursor race that like uplifted humanity or something? And I'm only 50% joking about this, to be honest. I'm kind of convinced myself.
Well, the thing is that's basically the story of The Expanse. So there might be another Twitter storm if that's the case. We'll not get into that, but I think that they definitely have meaning. Now, I don't know whether they actually are in the real world. Like David, you mentioned that they might be on the planet they're going to. I think that would be cool, but then I wonder why they're seeping into this simulation on the Prometheus spaceship. Does that mean that they know where they're going? They've seen where they're going? I don't know why. Whenever I view this idea of them traveling across the system or wherever they are, I imagine they sort of a bit unknown about where they're going. But you're maybe saying that they know exactly where they're going, and therefore
I think so. Yeah. And I think that's one of the big twists that will be coming up in the next season is like what's on the planet. So we're going to talk later about whether or not 2099 is real. But if it is real, then this is a mystery show. We're just like Dark. We're looking for a series of bomb drop reveals. Mm-hmm. So I think if it's real, then we have to go to, well, what's on the planet that's going to shock us? If it's an empty planet, then the surprising thing would be like aliens or something. But I think of the movie Prometheus, because 1899, like A Song of Ice and Fire, is doing this alchemical mixing of so many influences, which I think is in keeping with literary tradition. Like we said, Anthony, if you steal one person's plot, it's plagiarism. If you borrow from all the great plots, then it's an alchemical mix of whatever.
Yeah, so it's a new idea.
I think the movie Prometheus, which obviously is in the Aliens universe, there's literally people on a ship flying to a planet that they think is unknown, but when they get there, they find pyramids. It's like, well, somebody's been there. It turns out to be the master race of alien creators or whatever. But yeah, I think that somebody has been on the planet before. And if humans are going there, then it's possible we've already been there.
Interesting.
Yeah, okay. That's really interesting. And I mean, I don't want to get too much into the like mission of the Prometheus just yet, because I think that's like a separate thing we're going to talk about. Yeah. like the movie Prometheus, I think they like, I'm trying to remember how the story of that movie goes, but isn't it like they get like coordinates from something on Earth that sends them to that specific planet? So
It's
maybe like they unearthed the like coordinates or something similar on Earth, and now they're headed to some destination in the galaxy.
I thought about it as soon as we saw the mystery coordinates on the Prometheus ship. I was like, oh, aliens! This is an aliens plot point.
Okay,
so imagine if this just turned into aliens. That'd be so fucking cool. That'd be good.
Well, it'll have some twist though, because we're also doing Total Recall and Westworld a little bit, and
Matrix, definitely Matrix.
Well, obviously,
Well, I think I don't know why I can't get out of my mind the idea that these pyramids are like a representation of something within our mind. I can't, like, the idea of like, that room where Daniel and Maura was represented within the pyramid, or they wanted us to think that anyway. So the idea of like this moment in this person's mind is inside this pyramid. I can't, and that could definitely could tie into the idea of it being a real place on this planet, and sort of it symbolizes something else. I don't know whether or not they would go down the route of having like, supreme alien creatures. I think it would be pretty cool if they were to do something like that. I know that the creators did say that this show is about who we are, why are we here? So if they were to go down the route of sort of a creator, or even like an idea of like, the origins of life, that would be pretty cool. Like, what if the Prometheus is actually traveling? What if it's traveling? I suppose we already know they're going to Europe, so they are coming from
Anthony,
our Earth.
let me pause you right there, because in the Aliens body of movies, particularly the last couple, it's become very clear that they are paralleling the idea of humans creating artificial intelligence to the idea of these aliens creating humans and other creatures. So I think that we could, if we see aliens, it will probably be paralleled to the AI creation stuff.
Okay, yeah, I could see that. I could definitely see that. Okay, awesome. Yeah. So we've sort of sorted out that Baron and Yoncha. If you didn't have an idea yet, if you didn't know what season 2 is,
I got one more thing for you, which is that if you think about the pyramid being real or not, in the sim, when we first see the little pyramid, it represents the way out. It says "wake up," and before Daniel hacks the program, it's the key to get out of the sim. So if we think about the themes, if there is a real pyramid and a real black substance, it's the way out of humanity. So if there is joining a sim, joining a computer, there might be new technology that's facilitated by the substance that we found on this other planet. That's kind of where I think this is going.
So it could be, I could definitely see that. It could be like a His Dark Materials, a way to be one with the universe, sort of thing. Like you go out of your human form and become
some
one with the
hive
universe
mind thing or something.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. All right, Conrad. You mentioned a few of your mysteries. What's one you want to have a wee chat about?
So okay, I'll start with the Maura stuff, because this is just going to be me wildly speculating based on theories that I've proposed that now will have no conclusion. So I can't be wrong. I'm playing with house money really on this theory. So I have said that I think, and we'll get into this more in the IT or the computer sciencey section where we talk about singletons and all that good stuff. But that Maura is like, we know that she's kind of responsible for the simulation that we saw her breaking out of at the end of the first season. But I think there's more to come in that respect, and I think that she is still in control of all of it. She just doesn't realize it. And part of that, I think, and the reason that the simulation is so wildly inconsistent and this like mishmash of her memories and the memories of others is the idea of trauma that I think is like really central to a lot of character theming in this show. So kind of everyone really has some dark secret in their past or something that they're running away from. But I think her more than most, she has the like unresolved issues with her dad that it hasn't really been specified actually what he did to her, but I think it's from the performance you can see there's trauma there. The loss of her son, that was so traumatic for her that she like basically scrubbed it from her memory and made it so that she couldn't even conceive of the idea of conceiving because it's too painful for her. And I also think that she's not together with her husband anymore in the real world. I think they probably divorced as a result, if they were ever married. Did they say no? They are married, aren't they? Yeah. So I think they probably divorced as a result of Elliot's death. So yeah, I kind of just wanted to throw that out there as both a theme of the show and also as maybe something that we would have seen in the now unmade seasons.
So there's a couple of what's interesting to me, because I was trying to figure out, like, obviously the last couple of episodes, everyone's claiming to know what the real deal is, Daniel and Henry, and they're sort of saying different things, but both Daniel and Henry think Maura created this stuff. Like, Daniel says to Maura, this is the first thing we created, this little room, our little hideaway room. And then of course Henry has this line where he says, you're the reason that we're all on this course, or that we're all stuck in here. I forget what the words are, but it's like, yeah, the simulation is clearly a trap with the Prometheus Kerberos language, and they are stuck in there repeating these loops. Conrad, what did you think of my idea that it was originally created as a therapy device to help people work through trauma?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think there's something to that. I think that there's like an element of this that I think it would have been really interesting for them to explore, is this idea that this is a tool for exploring not just your like kind of surface level emotions, but also like your subconscious and the kind of scars that you bear on it. And one of the unforeseen side effects of going that deep into the human subconscious, and perhaps even like building the simulation out of a collective of subconsciousnesses, is that trauma then comes to define it and you get lost in it. And I think that's like both from like kind of plot standpoint is something they could have done a lot with in future seasons. But I also think like thematically it works really well with the rest of the show, because like, as I've said, like everyone is kind of running away from something. Like there's so much character trauma in this show.
Everyone's got trauma in the past, and I see the whole idea of like Maura's trauma seeping into this. And Conrad's mentioned before to me that he thinks like the Henry Singleton within this simulation potentially is a figment of Maura's mind. I think that after our last episode, maybe Conrad's changed his mind on that, because the idea that Daniel saying he's just as trapped in here as everyone else, potentially that means he is actually plugged in, and maybe I'm leaning that way. My point is, though, we find out that we've told that Henry was working on something to help his wife, so Maura's mother. I would like to know some more in that way. So obviously, the idea of cycles of trauma, the way that Henry treated Maura was not healthy, the way that he left her in the forest. I want to know if that actually legitimately happened, or if that's something that we would have been revealed as like sort of analogy for something. And also, this finally my point as well, that the trauma of the sun being, they made this simulation so that they could be with the sun forever in this constant loop, and then eventually got lost in it. And the idea of the room was the first one they made. I personally, now I don't know if I believe this, but I think there's a potential that Elliot maybe is something like her first attempt at putting someone onto an AI, at putting something.
Listen,
like
that idea has been gnawing at me, Anthony. Either that he's the first experiment because he was dying and so they did it early, or that he literally is a creation. He is not a person, but
he's just
something
AI,
that
Daniel
and Maura created. Yeah.
And I think I also mentioned
she doesn't look like Maura at all. She's a redhead, and the kid he looks like Daniel, but
I want to propose something. This is kind of going to send us off potentially in a slight tangent here, but I want to propose something here, because that is an interesting point. I kind of wrote this. This is another thing that I sort of wrote down in jest, and then the more I thought about it, the more I was like, this might be true actually. And that is that when Maura wakes up in 2099, she gets a message on the terminal or whatever from Kieran. I can't remember. I haven't written down exactly what it says, but it's like, glad you're awake or something.
Welcome to reality.
Welcome to reality. Now, I am 99.9% certain that Kieran is an AI who's in control of the Prometheus. And I wonder whether Kieran was another experiment of hers to basically take the consciousness of a person who was alive. So maybe she did have a brother called Kieran and stick it into an AI. But in this case, it's like the sort of central intelligence for a spaceship or something along those lines, similar to Elliot.
Sort of makes sense with the whole, what did you do to my brother? Where is he missing? Why has he been missing on the Prometheus? Yeah, that kind of makes sense. But because none of that stuff has any coherence to it. Like there's no theory about why that plot point is there, that Henry did something to it. Like, what? And she also says, I know what you're doing on these ships.
Yeah.
So it's like, that first scene actually is really weird, because it's kind of the end of a loop, but it's very different from the end of the loop that we get at the end of the show. because she's all like, what have you done to my memories? Why can't I remember? Where's my brother? So is that like a loop where she figured out some stuff, but not nearly as much as, you know, the one that we saw, or what?
Yeah, she didn't get there. She didn't get there in time. It really, it really feels to me like they heard all the fans theorizing about Claudia having multiple loops to figure things out, and they're like, "There's the next show." It feels like that to me. But I think as well the idea of that Kieran is an AI, that throws another question to me. Then, who was the person who already woke up out of the simulation? Because one of the pods,
one of them was empty
in the spaceship, was empty. There was 2 empty, Moira's one and one other. So whenever they talk about like Kieran left years ago or a long time ago, and they haven't seen him for a while, my thought was that Kieran was plugged in here too. So I don't actually know, or maybe
Daniel or Kieran.
Yeah, maybe Daniel was plugged in. Potentially Daniel was plugged in, and maybe he was uploaded successfully as an AI onto it, and then his body was no longer needed to be plugged in. I don't know, something like this.
Maybe, someone's missing. That's like one of those little things that's really gonna eat at me. Not knowing.
So I think Daniel is running around the ship using rogue terminals to get in and out, but not under the control of everything else. That's how he comes across to me, as someone who is coming in and out of the sim at will, because he's saying like, oh, we've done this hundreds of times. Like, he's able to reprogram the sim. He's the master of that thing. Like, that's because him and Maura helped design it. So I think that's why he knows how to hack it.
In fact, actually, building on that, I noticed in my most recent rewatch while I was preparing for our breakdowns that Henry says to, over the little tannoy system in episode 7, when he's talking to Maura and Daniel.
I love the PA system, by the way.
Yeah,
it's so good.
When the shutdown is starting and he's talking over that little thing, like, you know, come to the front desk I joked about. When he's talking over that, he says, you used the Prometheus to get to her. Well done. Now, let's think about that. What he did was he never actually went on the boat, the Prometheus. He started ripping the sides off the actual Kerberos simulation and going into these tunnels, which were wired tunnels. I think he was literally using the wires and the server blocks and stuff to go through the Prometheus spaceship to get through these places.
Yeah, I think it's telling that he's the only one who ever goes into those tunnels. Like, even when he could, if he knows they're there, it stands to reason that he could have taken Elliot through them or taken Maura through them at some point.
So I don't mean that he's actually using physically in the ship. Then he's not physically; he's still in the simulation, but he's using the cables and the knowledge of the actual setup of the server block. You know what I mean? So by going into these tunnels, he's actually using pathways that you shouldn't be able to use within the simulation. You know?
So that's a very interesting idea. A different idea would be that he actually was on the Prometheus ship, because he swam aboard right after they went over to the ship. So he could have literally been on the ship. It makes me think of the end of the show where Daniel rigs it so that they enter the storage mainframe. Okay. So it's like he's put them outside the normal path as well. So I feel like, the Prometheus doesn't have, once the ships go through the whirlpool, they don't have the trapdoors anymore.
Yeah.
But the ghost ship Prometheus does have trapdoors.
Yeah.
So
yes,
if he somehow, this gets back into the question of, where does the ghost ship come from? Do they take a ship out of storage and run it back through the whirlpool? And is that why it looks like it's been underwater and it's all rusted? Because it could be that he hung out in storage and then went back through the whirlpool and ended up on the ghost ship, and thereby got to Kerberos.
Yeah, okay, that would make sense to me. The idea that is really cool. I was talking to Conrad actually in a previous breakdown as well about the idea that if he was on the Prometheus and he wasn't meant to be on this boat, why does he have his memory underneath his bed in his room on the Kerberos? So like he has some meaning there, unless he's just filling the role of whose room that really is. Maybe this character, Daniel, this AI or whatever, isn't her true husband, because I have speculated before about the feeling between Ike and Maura. Maybe there's something more there.
Ike's room doesn't have a number on it, I noticed.
Yeah, he's the captain. He doesn't have a number. So maybe he's plugged into the wrong terminal or something.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're definitely showing the relationship between Ike and Maura as a lot more intimate than the relationship between Daniel and Maura.
Yeah. What I assumed is that, and I agree with that. What I assumed is that when Daniel first shows up, he sends the bug under the door. And I felt like that bug reprogrammed that room to be his at that point.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, like
so
setting
maybe
a
memories
spawn
just
point
are
we were
there.
joking about.
But we do have to. Daniel gets his own episode where he wakes up with the triangle eye, and he's got his own memory. So all of that stuff where he thinks he's been through the sim hundreds of times, that could all be his fake memory.
Yeah, exactly.
Everyone else's has fake memories that are inside 1899 context. Maybe his fake memory is that he's this guy running around through the Sims trying to rescue people.
Oh, I think that's actually the case. I think that is the case because, like, why would he have more knowledge? I think if the system,
because someone has to.
And
he helped design it.
But the system might be set up in a way that you have to have these two opposing sides. Maybe, I don't know what their job is, what they're trying to do. Obviously, they're trying to wake up Mora, or Henry wanted to wake up himself, actually. But, like, I don't know why.
Daniel and Henry are like opposite players with similar powers, right? They both run outside the sim and have controllers and things, right? They're the only people with controllers.
Yeah, well, you know, Sebastian as well, who's Conor McGregor. But they have they do have actually a bit of strange dialogue with Henry when he's talking about Mora. He says that Mora's going to get us all out of here. I think he alludes to the idea of her waking them all up. But if that's the case, why does he want to leave the simulation first? He's actively choosing what's not right, or what's not the best option for everyone, you know?
So I noticed, Anthony, when Henry gets ready to turn the key, Conor McGregor and Elliot are in the room. They both close their eyes like they're expecting to be out of the sim too. So they didn't really spell it out, but it's not just Henry. Henry thinks that turning that key is going to get all of them out of the sim.
Okay. Also, he
makes it kind of selfish of Daniel and Mora to focus on getting Mora out when everyone else can get out. But maybe there's an important reason why that is.
Well, that gets into my probably into my computer sciencey stuff as to like I think there's a reason why these people who seemingly have goals in common are acting in opposition to one another when like if they really have the same goals, it would just be okay. Like I would have assumed by this point they'd have just hugged it out and been like, oh, actually no, let's just figure this one out together, guys.
Well, again, going to the themes first, we see that Henry is talking about seekers and avoiders, and Henry wants to keep Mora in the sim forever. And if there is a plot point where the question is, do we upload humanity to an AI, or do we turn people into computers, or whatever it is, there should be a faction on either side, one that wants it and one that doesn't. And Henry seems like, based on what he's saying, is that he would be pro uploading into the AI, where it's actually the seekers who want to open every door of curiosity and not necessarily go along with what everyone is doing. There might be people who don't want that to me is why Daniel says this is so much bigger than you think. It's literally the future of humanity, whether or not we become a computer or a hive mind or not.
Well, I think I'm fully buying into that. That definitely sounds believable to me.
I think you're right, and I think also, like, I always trying to, like, I always keep the creator's thoughts in mind when I'm thinking about this. Right? It's weird calling the creator, you know, just in the context of the show, but I always try and keep their thoughts in mind, because they did talk about this show being an answer to rising tensions in the world, and like the idea of like this polarization that's happening. And I do believe that they are making a comment that, you know, I could picture that the idea that they're saying seekers and avoiders, and the idea of not wanting to, you know, some people don't mind just going up onto the AI and some people don't want to. I could picture that 100% as a conversation between two people where they're saying, you know, you shouldn't trust everything you read on Facebook, and then they're like, what are you talking about? It must be real. It's in the news, right? So I could see that as like a seeker and avoider conversation. And that might be what it boils down to. I said to David the other day when we were doing,
I really like the social media analogy, unplugging from social media. That would really make sense as like the message. Go ahead.
Yeah. Sorry. And like I said, you know, in Dark, it all boiled down to the love between a father and a son. And I thought to myself, in this show, could it all boil down to like, you know, like a young person, like a young woman, Mora, trying to convince her father not to be so conservative? You know, it would be so funny if that's what it boiled down to.
Stop liking QAnon posts, Dad. That's what this is. That's what this is about.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there we go.
Problem out there. It really is. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Just before we move into the tech, then was there any of those mysteries which were sort of sitting there unspoken?
Yeah, so we've touched on a bunch of these. I'm looking at the list of your 33 that I jotted down a few of. Have we met Ciaran in disguise is related to like who's the other person that snuck out, or like who is Ike Ciaran? I you know, stuff like that. Like we've asked questions of is there somebody that is actually Ciaran, or is somebody plugged into the wrong terminal? I don't know where
you said it was Sebastian. That was your pitch to me, Anthony.
Potentially, no. I said that because there's people. I keep my finger on the pulse, guys. Right, and I think that there's people talking about the idea that Sebastian is actually Ciaran. Now, having said that, we know from Dark that these creators are really good at introducing a new character in season 2, which becomes a fan favorite. So I don't necessarily think we need to have seen Ciaran, but I do think it's a possibility. Ike, I think there's too much of a sort of romantic-y thing going on between potentially Ike and Mora for it to be him.
Ciaran, sorry, I come from the Game of Thrones universe. That's not a barrier.
Yeah. I mean, it's not.
I come from the Dark universe, so I understand as well. Like, not a barrier at all.
Listen, sometimes you have a hot sister / aunt and
uncle niece, aunt nephew. That's a sweet spot.
Yeah, a perfect match. But the thing is,
don't cut that out, Anthony.
I don't think they'll go there again. I would be really surprised if they went there again.
No. The more interesting question about Ike is why his fake memories are all about being a captain on the Prometheus.
Yeah,
like clearly he's the captain on the spaceship, or was, but he's in the sim, so he's not actually steering the ship. The big question here is, when Ike's thinking of his burning family and stuff, is he remembering some disaster from another space mission or another spaceship? I really feel like it's something along those lines.
Yeah. I mean, I think the setting, like the 1899 setting, is like designed to like obfuscate things that actually did happen. Because I think throughout this show, there's like a muddling of things that really did happen, but they're in the wrong place at the wrong time. So like Elliot's grave being near Mora's home or the institute where she grew up, and her dad was running experiments to try and help her mum. Like that stuff shouldn't be where it is. It shouldn't be right next to each other. And I think Ike is the same way. Like the memories of him being captain of the Prometheus, I think that probably is true. I think he probably is captain of the Prometheus. But I mean, if we follow the thread through of like humanity is on the cusp of making this species altering decision about whether it's going to become part of like an integrated AI or whatever, then it stands to reason that he could captain the ship from this kind of like neural network that they're all a part of. Like he doesn't necessarily need to be conscious and doing it. Maybe and the same could be said for his memories of his family. Like maybe he lost them in, I don't know, he definitely lost them in a fire. I'm prepared to say that much, I think is true, but the rest is up for debate, I think.
I think it's up to the debate whether that's his family, because he has the opposite dress sense to his whole family. He wears black, they wear light colors. I think there's a potential that he is plugged in the wrong system and he's getting someone else's memory.
That's possible.
That's always possible. I do feel like that's a good idea and it's going to be happening somewhere, but it's just one of those things where it's like, well, it could, what if
who's plugged in?
We just have to keep it in the back of our mind. The thing about Ike's fake memory and his plot is that it turns around this really important decision point of whether or not to go investigate the Prometheus and then whether or not to do anything about it. Everybody else wants him to keep going to New York, including Daniel, unless he's just running a psych job on Mora, which I do think a lot of Daniel's comments are meant to get Mora to like question herself, to help her wake up, like about the Irish thing and all that. He's like, you're not Irish. He's getting her to like think about how her story doesn't match. But Daniel is like, oh, that madman turning the ship around, And then as soon as people did it, then he teleported the Prometheus back on its course. So I really feel like there's got to be some plot point in space about the spaceship stopping or keeping on its mission. And we see that in Star Trek and stuff all the time. It's like,
maybe
whenever you stop, something happens.
They run out of thruster. They don't know what to do.
So like Ike's whole thing, I guess, is that the impression I got was that he wasn't. I think he actually literally says it. He wasn't there when his family died. Like he was doing his ship captaining, whatever.
Yeah.
So I wonder if there is like this kind of central, and it kind of speaks to what you were just saying, David, about like the central idea of his character that he always has to get back to the Prometheus because he is the captain of the Prometheus, and that's represented in the simulation, or in the 1899 simulation, as him, despite everyone saying you shouldn't be doing this, he's like, I've got to go over to that ship because there's something sort of core to his character that makes him do it, or compels him to do it. And in 2099, it's the same thing. Like, he is compelled to resume control of the actual spaceship as well.
Yeah, that kind of makes sense. It's about whether or not he's controlling the ship or not.
I think that his family might also represent just humanity, and the idea that he's off captaining this ship to a new world while humanity burns. You know, I think that could be it
as well. Yeah, I mean, that was the other thing we haven't really actually mentioned, but I mean, it kind of like it says that the Prometheus is a survival mission. So I guess we all agreed that like this is like a colonization ship or something that's headed to a new garden world somewhere to start again, and has left humanity behind.
I think that's what I sort of take that. Whether or not it's a simulation, we'll get into later. But I think that will be the idea of what they're doing. Because I think like going to America, to the new world in 1899, as well as going to a new world, literally, in 2099. I just think that this is sort of moving towards transition of humanity, as we said, transition to an AI. But yeah, I think that potentially that is what's happening. I think they are a survival mission. Why? What are the other ideas there, Conrad?
There weren't any, to be honest. That was it. That was the only one I wrote down. I just wanted to see if anyone
had just really hoping we were agreeing with you there.
Yeah. So let me put this out. All right, going with the idea that the 2099 is real. And they're in the sim for a couple of reasons. One, and this is one of the reasons why I think 2099 is real, is because you need putting people in a sim is a great way to keep everyone busy on a long space mission. You can probably distort time if you can mess with people's memories, so it doesn't seem like they're on it for that long. And then you can put the bodies in maybe a little more like suspended, biochemistry or something. The main thing is the therapy angle. Every science fiction novel about space colony, whether it's on the ship or on the colony, you always get this claustrophobic effect where it's a small group of people in a small space, and sooner or later the shit gets crazy in that small space. So for space colonists, you want everyone to be well adjusted, to be sorted out with their shit. So putting them in a therapy simulation while they go to the new world makes a lot of sense to me. And Henry says, we're running the simulation over and over again. And he's like shaking his head, like, I keep doing the same things because they're prisoners to their emotions, blah, 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 blah. Run it again. So it's kind of like either Henry or Kieran, the AI running the sim, wants the people to leave behind their old identity and make new decisions to grow. And so if you look at Ike, he's being given this thing where it's like, keep going with the mission, do what everyone wants, or stop. And look, and he makes the decision to stop and look at the Prometheus. And I'm just wondering, is that the wrong decision? Does he need to get to the point where he can leave behind the past and think of the people on the boat and keep going with the mission? Is that the lesson he needs to learn?
Oh, that's a really, really good idea. I think the idea of conditioning people's minds on the way to the new world so that when they reach the new world, they're ready to start a new colony. Brilliant. I think that's really, really good idea. Well, there it is, the first part of our discussion with David Lightbringer about 1899. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next one. It's going to be all about the computer science elements of 1899. Also, we've got more breakdowns coming in the months ahead. Thanks very much for watching. See you in the next one.